Hello and welcome to the webinar entitled The Dynamics of Building and Backtesting Trading Algorithms, hosted by Vertex Analytics and OptionsCity. I will be your host, Lauren Reinhardt from OptionsCity Software. Please use the Q&A panel of the GoToWebinar to submit your questions throughout the session, and we'll address them at the end, so please stick around. And if you're on Twitter, you can use the hashtag FWAWEB. FWAWeb is the hashtag on Twitter. So as we get started here, just want to give you a brief kind of background on OptionsCity. OptionsCity continues to be a leader in the electronic and algo trading space. OptionsCity products are built on power and speed, and we are committed to innovation with Metro and most recently Freeway. OptionsCity is a certified independent software vendor on leading derivatives exchanges. Similarly, Vertex Analytics is a leader in the historical and real-time market data space. Vertex's focus is on enabling clients to focus on data rather than coping with it. Read the brief disclaimer here. The views expressed in this presentation are intended solely as theoretical and are based on a particular set of circumstances and assumptions and are not intended as investment advice or trading recommendations. As we begin here, we are going to be focusing on, as we stated in the beginning, the dynamics of building and backtesting trading algorithms. And recently, OptionsCity and Vertex Analytics have formed a partnership and are in the process of releasing a product called Freeway Analytics, which will be sort of unveiled and discussed today. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jim Austin for Vertex Analytics, who can speak a little bit about Vertex and this partnership.
Well, first, I'd like to thank Hazem and OptionsCity for the time and effort they've put forth to this point for this webinar and the integration of the Vertex technology into Freeway. Vertex, to begin with, is a technology company first and foremost. Our underlying technology collects, manages, and provides real-time rendering for financial markets. This includes historical real-time data and our proprietary market data analytics. All of this is on demand from a hosted solution. In addition, if a hosted solution is not sufficient, we install our data server technology at your site or co-location as well. So the next part that we've come up with between OptionsCity and Vertex Analytics is the opportunity, and the opportunity that we saw almost a year ago to be able to bring this product to the forefront, which you'll see today. OptionsCity has a vision for Freeway to be an all-encompassing testing and execution system, and Vertex supports the OptionsCity team and the technology to help make this happen, ultimately giving the client a turnkey platform for a lower cost of ownership in the whole build versus buy model. The one thing, the opportunity that we're trying to seize here is that there are a lot of disparate systems. A lot of people who potentially are on this webinar today have to go through this process of first identifying where to source your data from. Is it from a other third-party vendor, signing up with Bloomberg or getting a contract like that in place, also having reliability in that data. The second thing you always have to do is there's a storage question. Not only do you have hardware concerns, but you also have where that data is going to go to. Is it going to go to a SQL Server relational sort of database? And finally, there's the tools. The tools to help make those things happen. Is it some sort of quant or research that you utilize as something like MATLAB or R? Once those systems are in place and you do your testing, then there's the whole conversion of saying, I have a model and I would like to make this, put this into production to actually try to make some money with your algorithm that you've come up with. And that process takes quite a bit of time. So that's where we saw the opportunity to come up with Freeway Analytics at this point. Value-added data that we're providing is that we also have market data, Vertex does, but we've created something that we refer to as verbs. Not only do we do high-frequency data, we also take care of low-frequency data as well, such as end-of-day data. This allows users to get exactly what they need, whether it be anything from end-of-day to weekly data to intraday data to any or every event or message. And so the question becomes is why is that important? Simply put, the reason why we have this in place, and it's great to integrate into the OptionsCity platform, is that it allows those who aren't running ultra low latency systems to view and analyze this data for their own use. There's a lot of systems out there that are built for it that everybody's trying to compete with, and we try to provide analytics and insights into some of those things that happen in the marketplace that otherwise you wouldn't be able to see. So at this point, I'd like to turn it back to Lauren or Andrew to continue on with the demo.
Sure. Just a quick question related to kind of your summation of Vertex and how it fits in with OptionsCity, Jim. Could you give a brief example of how some of the verbs work and what those might entail?
Sure. A simple verb could be something that is as simple as getting a quote at the current market. It could be something more complicated as providing an aggregation of the number of book modifications, the number of book insertions or deletions that are happening in real time and from a historical perspective. So the nice part of what a verb does is that you can use it in historical context, but also look at it in real time. So the same idea of how we've built our analytics platform is to be able to look at something from a historical perspective and actually apply that in your real time to help your trading decisions.
Awesome. And one further point I just wanted to kind of throw in is in addition to actual time and trade data, you guys have actual time and quote data as well, which enables the end user to be able to diagnose not just what happened in the market from a trade perspective, but also what was kind of leading up to that trade, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, there's other services out there that collect tick data, some things historically, some do them real time. We do both. And we do also, with that, not every single quote, but we build out the entire book of any level for any product in the marketplace at this point in time for CME Globex. But the idea is that it's the all-encompassing data set that you would want to potentially use to run a real backtest.
Awesome. Well, Jim, we appreciate you being here, and we're excited about the partnership. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Lissy, our product manager at OptionCity Software, who's going to delve further into Freeway Analytics.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. What I'm going to talk about today is three separate things. So the first thing that we'll discuss is what is a backtest? What are the ingredients to it? How does one backtest vary from another? What do different backtests look like? And how do they all fit together? The second thing is we're going to delve a little bit deeper into OptionCity offerings with Freeway Analytics and discuss how you add all those ingredients together and come up with a usable model for a real-world simulation of your trade or of your algo. And then finally, I'm going to finish up with a quick demo of our system and just show what that looks like on the OptionCity platform. So the first thing with any backtest that you have to obviously handle is the data. So Jim gave us a pretty good introduction on what Vertex Analytics provides and how they answer some of the questions about data. Depending on what your backtest is trying to uncover or investigate, you're going to want to choose different contracts, different time ranges. Granularity is extremely important. Somebody that wants to test some features of a matching engine or some very low latency type trades is going to need a far different set of data than someone who wants to look at long-term buy and hold strategies based on larger technical indicators. And obviously, you don't want to be getting way too much data or way too little data for what the backtest you want to do is. Once you've done that, the next difficulty is obviously integrating that with the platform you're using. We hear from a lot of customers and hear a lot of pain points regarding getting just loads and loads of data, huge files, and trying to get those into a backtesting environment. And that can often be a pretty difficult task. The next thing, as you can imagine, that goes into a backtest, kind of the input, is the algo itself. Now, the algo itself is often going to be very tightly coupled to the simulation environment that you're working with. Now, this works very well in a lot of cases because obviously if you're writing an algo directly to your simulation environment, then you can use all of the simulation environment's features and get a very good idea based on that sim environment. However, the problem comes in when you actually want to deploy this algo. Often people that spend a lot of time writing algos in R or MATLAB or some sort of Python derivative can get some very good results after a long period of time, but then essentially have to go back to the drawing board, back to stage 0, when they actually want to deploy that to production. So the answer to how you write your algo, where you write your algo, in most cases is everywhere. And that's often difficult, that's That's leading to code duplication, and it's not going to be ideal for a fast workflow, which is really the most important thing, as you'll see. So one thing that we try to provide, and we'll talk about this more later, is a single environment where you can do both the back testing and then the deployment to production. So once you have those two ingredients, the next step is moving to the actual matching engine. So different simulation systems have different ways they handle the matching engine. There's kind of a whole gamut from no matching engine, in which case you just assume that you can get liquidity when a price is there. And this would be well suited to a longer term strategy or to a very liquid strategy, all the way down to a strategy that takes the entire book in and then does a very complicated analysis on how fills actually get generated. Obviously, the tighter you get into the trade, the more latency is going to matter. Often when you get a buy signal or a sell signal, you're not going to actually be able to get there in time. So if that's your strategy, latency modeling is going to be extremely important. And then just everything else that comes on top of that trading system. The closer you want to get to production, obviously the more you have a need for a production type system that can take into account things like positions and limits and risk and order management and life cycles. And all that is absolutely something that is worth considering and worth addressing as early on as possible. So then obviously you're at the point where you can run the back test. So you've run the back test, you've run it once, you've optimized it and run it many times. The question is, what happens next? What happens now? What's the next step? In most cases, there's going to be several iterations before you actually get to production code. Typically, what we'll see with customers and what we've seen in our past experience is that the first run of a back test produces some interesting results, but isn't going to be the ultimate thing that you run in production. You're going to go back, you're going to iterate, you're going to change parameters, you're going to change sections of your code. So an extremely important part of any backtesting system is how fast you can iterate. So with any system, you have to remember that the test itself is really only a piece of the overall puzzle. Going back and changing and tweaking and being able to modify that, as well as keeping your production in sync with your backtest and keeping those potentially 2 or more code bases together, that's going to be a very important part. And then finally, now what? So you've got this, you've tweaked, you've iterated. How do you turn that into profits? How do you get that out to market? And as we've discussed, that can be range from anything from start over at ground zero and write the whole thing in another platform, or make some tweaks to your existing code. Different situations and different platforms have different ways of doing it. But obviously this is going to be a very important factor to the success and the speed of your backtest. So now that we've kind of talked about some of the ingredients to the overall backtest and seen how everything comes together, let's talk a little more in depth about how the OptionsCity platform, how Freeway Analytics helps you get in and helps ease some of these concerns that we've discussed previously. So what you see here is a very similar diagram. This is really going to focus on how we integrate these various factors into our system. So the first one is the data portion. So the data, obviously, that's a big headache for many people. Getting that data, getting it in, and then potentially querying other pieces of data when you find that a specific algo works well for one piece of market data. How do you get another piece in there? What's the process for that? In Freeway, we've built in direct connectivity to Vertex Analytics. So if you look at this screenshot right here, you can see that we have an integrated query window that allows you to choose several parameters of the data. So you can choose everything from granularity to your instrument set, obviously your date range. If you choose to have a lower granularity, so bars, for example, 1 minute or 1 day bars, we'll actually build out a real book for you. We'll build out bids and we'll build out offers and try to simulate what the market may have looked like at that time so you can fire real trades into that market. And then we'll save it locally onto our system. From there, that gets incorporated into Freeway, and you can write any of your standard algorithms and run those just like you would live data. In discussing those algorithms, as I mentioned before, a huge benefit to using a platform that's designed both for production and for backtesting is some of the built-in capabilities that it provides that can immediately be transitioned over to production capabilities when you want to actually deploy this algo. With the Freeway system, we have the things you might expect: order execution management, details about instruments, everything from P&L to risk to all of those types of systems are already in place, are already very well tested, and you can just use those with one line of code instead of having to worry about reinventing the wheel on any of that. The code itself is really designed to be plug and play with either a simulation or production live data. And the code itself you write is going to be industry standard Java. You don't need to learn some esoteric language or have a different set of developers writing a statistical language versus the developers that are writing your production code. You can write it all in Java. You can find very easy both people and libraries on the internet that can plug right into your environment.
So just a quick question, Andrew. Are there any? I know we have our algo store, and I was wondering, are there some algos that potentially guys could look at on the algo store to kind of potentially throw into Freeway Analytics and utilize for the beginning back testing?
Sure. And for those of you that have been on some of our previous webinars, you're probably familiar already with our algo store. But OptionsCity, because of the way Freeway is architected, is designed to allow just about anybody, we have developers from all over the world, to write algos that will plug into the Freeway system. So any algo that you can see in the algo store, you can generally run with Freeway Analytics and run it in a backtest mode, so that certain functionality that you need for your algo can just be plug and played right in rather than having to build that from scratch. So it is designed to work in conjunction with the OptionsCity algo store. So a little more about the underpinnings with Freeway Analytics and what this data is actually going into. Freeway Analytics is a fully hosted system. We provide you essentially with a internet address you go to. The system all loads the software from that internet address. You never have to worry about buying software. You never have to worry about upgrading. It's all run locally as far as the front end itself, but the server component is going to be run by OptionsCity on our server. The server itself includes the simulator, which I touched on earlier, which goes all the way down to book level trade simulation. The software itself, in addition to processing market data, is capable of processing any kind of side channel data that you might want to put into it. Things like news are a good example. Vertex verbs that Jim mentioned also come into our system as a side channel, meaning non-market data. And just about anything else that you can think of plugs in fairly easily through some very standard interfaces. And as I touched on earlier, we include latency modeling, so the users that are concerned about being able to actually get to their trades can put in a latency in there that the system will simulate to show how long it might take you to reach a specific market. Once you've done the necessary algo and data gathering, you can then plug into our visualization engine. So any algo that you write has access to any of the visualization widgets that we provide in Freeway and in Freeway Analytics. As you can see here, those include 3D charts, heat maps, scatter plots, just about anything you can think of. These are really designed to give you that graphical view into what your algo is actually doing. Often it's great to see log messages, but seeing where you're buying and selling on a graph can often speak 1,000 words as far as the success or lack of success of the specific trading strategy. Optimization is also a key factor that a lot of users have requested and made use of on our software. Obviously, with optimization, there are drawbacks such as overfitting and things like that. But by and large, it's a very useful tool to understanding how your algo is going to react as the parameters that go into it are changed. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with optimization, but for those that are not, the way optimization works is it will run a specific algo over and over and over again and change the set of input parameters each time it runs. So for example, if you want to see how does my algo react to varying amounts of edge that I demand, or varying periods that I'm waiting, or different signal strengths, you can set the system to run an algo over and over again, dozens or hundreds of times if you want, for a specific piece of market data. And the output that you'll see is a 3D graph that gives you a surface of the parameters. So you can see, in this case, I have edge on the x-axis, size on the y-axis, and then P&L is always on the z-axis. And basically you can see, for instance, in this case, the edge, my best edge was right around the midpoint of the edge I was demanding, so right around 0.38, and I also had the best P&L at the highest size in this case. In general, again, it's there are drawbacks and there are things to be aware of, but by and large, when you're testing a new algo and want to understand how that algo or how that specific piece of market data is going to respond to different parameters, it's good to see this plot and see kind of the the different slopes to the different parameter inputs. And then finally, we'll touch again on deployment. Anything with Freeway Analytics is in the Freeway system. The API is almost entirely the same. So the code that you write for Freeway Analytics is going to be very similar or the exact same to the code that you're going to write for your production. So you don't need to worry about those two getting out of sync. You don't necessarily need a different development team. Those are going to be together and very linked. So with that, I'm going to do a quick demo of the system and show some of the features that I highlighted earlier. This is designed to be just a very, very quick overview. I'm going to show a few different screens. I highly encourage anyone that's interested in seeing more of the system or any more in-depth information to discuss it with either Lauren or one of our other salespeople and come on in for a demo or do a demo on an online webinar. So what I'm going to show first is the process that I alluded to in the presentation of fetching data from Vertex. So as I mentioned, there's a tight integration. What we do is basically have a plugin into Freeway. It's called the Vertex Data Provider that we can call up and query the data ourselves. So for instance, if I want to query, in this case, ES futures from March 12th to December 12th and get those for a month period of time with 1 minute bars, I can choose all of this. This is all user configurable. I can go anywhere from tick to bars to all. All will give me tick data, but also overlay bars on top of it. I can do that in just a few clicks. I hit OK, and then the system will go out and fetch that for me. So you can see it actually going out and fetching in the background as I'm waiting for it. Once you've done that and fetched it, that will show up in our simulator. I'm going to stop that right now. You'll see the different recordings we have. You can then control the simulator on this page and play it back at varying speeds. What I'm going to do today is go back to a very simple algo that I wrote for demo purposes. Essentially what this algo does is looks at incoming futures markets and will then roll the future to the front month as needed and essentially just sit on the bin, sit on the offer, and wait for fills. The name of this algo is the future roller. The way our system is architected, you write the algos themselves independent of worrying about any kind of optimization. We then have this optimizer job that will control this future roller and control all the playback of it, so it'll play it again and again and again for all the parameters that you set. And as it's doing it, you'll see the graph become built and populated with the data that's coming in. With any of these, you can very quickly configure the job and configure the parameters right from the main interface. So what I'm going to do now, just make sure the data stopped. I'm going to stop this as well. And what I'll do is run that. So while it's running this, I'm just going to flip over to my other screen because it's going to take a couple seconds to populate some of the data. Again, it has to run a month worth of data over and over again. So while it's doing that, I'm going to show the visualization screen where you can see the different data that's coming into our system. In this case, the data I was looking at was just 2 ES futures. As I mentioned, I was doing 1 month of data, so I have the September future and the December future. What comes into our system is all those Vertex verbs. So we've chosen a subset here so you can see what we get: bid aggressors, downtick volume, uptick volume, data points, VWAP, things like that. All those come into our system in just a standard table form. You can also see any kind of futures ladders if you care about those. The different graphs then get populated with all the data that comes in. Like everything in our system, you can zoom in if you want to really drill down and just see basically everything that's that's happening and how these different verbs are interacting with each other. The graphs are really designed to be very flexible. We have several different types of graphs. We have anything from, you can see the scatter plots and the heat maps and all that. Here's a heat map, to the 3D plot that you saw on the other screen, to grids. All of that is really designed to allow you to create kind of your ideal backtesting environment. By default, the system comes configured to a fairly widely used visualization environment, but that's all user definable and all customizable based on what your algos deem to be the most important. I'm going to go back to here. Let's see if we've generated anything. Looks like we haven't. I don't know what's going on. Oh, I know what's going on. As I mentioned before, you can change the speed of the simulator. In this case, I'm going to crank it up to full speed so it actually plows through some of these days. Obviously, if you're doing 1-minute bars, even simulating them on 32 speed isn't going to be satisfyingly fast. So what this is doing is basically running this test over and over again. Every time that finishes, it's going to add a entry into the optimizer table. So after you've done all of these, it's going to look something like this. In this case, I just ran 2 different variables, optimized them from 3 different, they each could take 3 different states. So 3 times 3 is 9 tests. So you can see that in this case, I can sort by P&L, and I can see the set of inputs that gave me my best P&L. As this optimization is being done, it will build on the system and build in this 3D graph. So you'll see, as it's right now, it's going to be a line. As it adds more data points, you're going to see the surface start to get fleshed out. And then ultimately, what you're going to come up with is something that looks like this. And this is a fairly simple one because, as I said, we only had, you can see 9 data points, but this can get arbitrarily complex. In this case, you see that I get the best P&L when I'm requiring the most ticks of edge. So basically when I'm sitting back away from the market and when I have my lowest quantity setting. When I take the number of ticks and move it way down, so I'm closer to right at the market and putting high quantity, you can see that in that case I get more adverse selection and I actually start to lose money. So that's most of the ins and outs of the Freeway Analytics platform. At this point, what I'd like to do is move back a little bit and go to any of the questions that we've gotten in the audience, and we'd be happy to answer those. Looks like we have a couple.
Sure. Just a quick question I have, Andrew. So you finished with kind of the optimization piece. How would you translate that into once you kind of optimize your algo into deployment via Freeway?
So what I would generally do with optimization is, I think optimization, as I mentioned before, is a very valuable tool. It's something that has to be taken with a grain of salt. You can go and optimize the heck out of your algo and have the exact perfect set of inputs that gives you the best P&L, but that only means that it's the best inputs for the data you tested it with. So what I use the optimization for is a starting point, and then from there, if I generally like how the inputs look, and I generally think the optimization surface is fairly smooth and fairly has some kind of well-defined slopes and isn't just really jagged, what I'll generally do from there is you'll take the algo and you'll start running it in production on very small size. And often what you might do is take one set of parameters and run it kind of in one instance with one lot, see if that seems to generally be working. Maybe you'll try a couple modifications around that and generally see if that works. But the idea is really to use the optimization not as complete gospel for the absolute perfect ideal running of your algo, but more to just get a starting point, draw a circle around what you think the best parameters might be for that algo.
And then that would be easily deployed once you've kind of come up with that whole scenario and finished that piece via Freeway. You could then submit that algo into production and it would go right to the market via our connection to the various exchanges, etc. Right?
Exactly, because as I showed on the screen, any parameter that you're optimizing with the Freeway optimizer is going to be a parameter that you directly can set from the configuration panel in the algo. So you already have that hook in there, and you can simply take it, set the settings to what you want, and then run it live.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to address some of the questions that we have here. The first one that's asked is, does the trade and quote data include options data? And the answer to that would be yes, of course. It does for both options and futures. The next question is, how does backtesting account for the impact of my algo? For example, let's suppose that my algo, upon signal sweeps one side of the market, during the backtest, how would this impact on the market be accounted for?
So I'll take that one. So that's a pretty good question. That's going to depend a lot on the dynamics of the algo and of the simulation that you have. If you're doing, for example, bar mode, if you're looking at 1 minute bars or 1 hour bars, the answer is it won't impact it at all, because on a 1 minute time frame, there won't be any real market impact to a market sweep. Now, contrast that with tick data, with higher resolution data. The way our simulator will work is, if you do sweep that, it will actually take out those, say you're sweeping the offers, it'll take those offers out of the book for a period of time until it starts to receive market updates and starts to replenish that offer side. Obviously, this is a fairly difficult, it's a complicated process because it's hard to completely simulate what the market would do in response to a sweep. So we do a couple, the things we do are trying to give it a pretty good simulation. So we will hold that we will take those offers out and wait for new messages to come in, and we will model that as being a sweep and taking out that quantity. So you won't be able to continuously lift the offer for infinity, forever. It'll change the price level as you trade more.
Okay, great. I'm going to go to the next question, which is what exactly does Vertex do? How does it differ from KX and KDB? I'll flip that over to Jim.
Well, for what Vertex does in this particular system is that we're able to provide not only tick data, it says how does it differ from KX and KDB. I am familiar with them a little bit. The first thing we do is that with our partnership with OptionsCity, it is a hosted solution. They have nothing from an administrative side, had to install any software locally with all the data residing on site for them to be able to run this back test or to load the data. So the other part too that Andrew made mention of with his 1 minute bar example is that we can build any sort of bar or metric or analytics at any time slice that you choose. So, for example, you could have a 1 minute bar and a 2 minute bar. It's very easily to customize that and say I want a 90-second bar. That could give you different opportunities that most standard things would do. The standard 60-second, 180-second, 300-second sort of bars. So there is a little bit of differentiation there, and the ability to get the system up and quickly is also another plus.
The other thing I'll say is, and I used KX and KDB a little bit. KX and KDB, at least from my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, generally require database administrators and all that. So it's more you host your own database, whereas Vertex provides a lot more to the user without requiring them to write a lot of sophisticated database queries and doing all that. Vertex does that for you, does that behind the scenes.
Awesome. Next question is, can your software be used for crude oil? The answer to that is yes. Of course, we support crude oil futures and options on futures data. The second one is a little bit of a more in-depth question. How long would it take to learn your software? I'll speak to that briefly. Clearly, when you're talking about algorithmic trading and a Java-based version of that via our platform Freeway, that kind of is dependent on how much programming experience you have related to specifically Java. Java usually translates well to other programming languages, but effectively, I think the fairest way to answer that question would be to say, it's dependent on your programming experience and then translating that into to our platform. And then we have a question that says, I'm on the phone and can I ask a question over the phone? No, you can't. You have to type it into the chat that you just asked. I apologize for that. So that kind of completes the end of the questions. Want to bring up our slide on how to contact both Vertex and OptionsCity. Both mine and Andrew and Jim's contact information is up there. Wanted to point out that the recording of this webinar will be made available on OptionsCity's website within 48 hours. And if you have questions about this webinar or you'd like a PDF copy of the presentation, Sarah McNabb, marketing manager's contact information is down at the bottom. You can reach out directly to her and she can provide you with those as well. With that, there's one more question that's come in. Sorry. So with that, we want to kind of wrap things up here. We appreciate you taking the time to join us this afternoon, and look forward to hearing from anybody with further questions, requests for demonstrations, etc. Thanks for joining us.